it's been, to make an understatement, it's been a pretty, strong and very intense discussion. Uh, I was fortunate to sit in some disparate sessions that went on all these three floors, and that intensity with which the discussions happened was extremely contagious. It also showed the seriousness that we have managed to build over the last couple of years in looking at this future that seems at once delightful and formidable. And I am really delighted to have such a galaxy of panelists to close this session. Uh, the 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 responsibilities of the closing session are quite different from those of the inaugural. So if you have spoken at the inaugural, you will have to wear a completely different hat now. Because what we need to set is the tone for what will happen between now and the 8th summit. What is it that we should carry from here? What is it that we need to do? What's the business that we have identified is critical? Where the gaps are, where our challenges are. And it's fortunate that I have all of you here who know each of these issues at great depth, and you've heard and have had the chance to meet and talk to everybody who's been gathered here. Um, what I want to do is I want to warn you that we will have Rakshita very quickly, and then she will be gone very quickly too. So, but before she gives her final word, um, I'd first like to invite Indranil uh, to give us the answer to the question that I have set out for everybody, which is what next in this framework of talking of accountability, which underlines everything that we have discussed today, and is the ultimate framework of good governance. And unfortunately, across the world today, that's what most people are confused about, have no idea as to what accountability means, both on the supply and the demand side. We as citizens don't know what to demand as far as accountability goes, and those who are sitting in governance are unable to even identify for themselves what it means to be accountable and responsible. So in that context, and given the fact that today we are going on to define a new era of citizenship that's defined by the digital, unlike the citizenship earlier that was defined by creed and race and blood and social media later on, and access to internet. Today we are looking at accountability that at citizenship which is digital. So given that framework, what do you think is what you carry from here, and what we should be looking for over the next year or so in terms of demanding accountability?
Well, first of all, thank you for inviting me. I mean, this is my first experience at DCS, and it has been really enriching 2 days. That's a very difficult question that you ask. So, in terms of defining accountability, and from the philanthropic side, what we see is demanding answers to our rights in a way. In a way, we have heard over the last 2 days there was a lot of focus on whether it's a rights-based approach rather than a making citizens as data points. So when you talk about accountability, it is about seeking answers to the problems that you have, seeking answers from the systems, and integrating the citizens with the kind of governance structures. Now, I'll give you an example from one of our grants that we support. It is about access to the forest rights, right? So therein you have the aspect of digitization as well, wherein the community is being their capacities are being enhanced to map the resources. And then they have to submit it at the department for access to their rights. Now what happens is the process stops there. Once you submit your application, there is no system whereby the community can go and seek answers. What happened to my application? Where is the bottleneck? And that is where I think the emphasis should be in terms of enhancing the community capacities as well as the civil society. Because from a funder's point of view, we can always leave it up to the grantees to work on that. But we also have to kind of understand the challenges that are there, right? So in terms of how do you seek accountability, that's a very kind of difficult process also, right? But in terms of defining what is accountability is to at least seek answers to the problems that you're facing, right? And to the problems that you know are there in the system. So I think that's how I will define accountability, is the ability to identify and seek the answers, at least enhance those capacities.
Thanks so much. And you know, that example that you take is so appropriate, that of the forest. And I'm particularly intrigued because some of us here in this state have been looking at forest issues. And forests, in a lot of ways, define exclusion. Exclusion for forests and environment itself, for forest dwellers, and all of that. And it's something that we have not even begun to understand. So therefore, that's a great example you take, and we can get back to that. But Rakshita's what is interesting and what is intriguing about what the work that Rakshita does, is a strong focus on transparency, which is in some sense the essential foundation of accountability. But she also, makes a constant refrain about bottom-up accountability. In most cases, accountability, Rakshita, is seen as top-down. And therefore, it is very interesting to look at what you do in terms of building systems that are bottom-up accountable. Could you just give us a preview on that, and tell us how you want us to help scale it up in the digital framework? Yeah.
So thank you, and I think it's nice to start with actually unpacking that accountability itself, because it needs to be qualified so very much. Because there's nobody in the room, even if you bring very competing interests together, who will disagree with accountability. Everybody thinks they are currently accountable. Government firmly believes it's accountable, tech companies do, people do, society feels. But it's how do we distinguish one kind of accountability from another? And that's really bringing, it's not to oversimplify, but sometimes the effort is really to bring back to the first principles of the question. Because when we qualify and clarify who this accountability is towards, then one needs to confront questions of who is defining the problem, who is proposing the solution, who is assessing whether the solution has worked or not worked. And if that flow of accountability is downward, then if a framework, if a digital intervention, or if even a non-digital intervention, if it has been introduced, if it is not managing to work, because even we club, we use the word people as a very homogeneous entity, and it's made of, we know, particularly in our country, how many different vulnerable sections of society come together to be clubbed under that word. If an intervention cannot work for the most historically marginalized, then what point was it of that system? Because we've remained at what status quo always was. So I'm just coming back to a conversation about bottom-up accountability really has to begin with those first principle questions of who are you trying to be accountable towards, and then making space for those people to ask these difficult questions. The second thing is also, I think, a principle to keep in mind when we do try and build, again, because there's no disagreement in हाँ होना तो चाहिए, पारदर्शिता होना चाहिए, जवाबदेही होना चाहिए. It's the disagreement begins on how and where the positive bias lies. And it's something that we had touched upon in a session also we did, that accountability, at least in this digital context, we're seeing with so many exclusions and unending evidence can keep being provided, but we will still keep getting the response. It's at least from the state that it's collateral damage. It's going to work out. It's going to sort out. 90% का तो हो गया, 10% आ ही रहा है. But if we start looking at accountability as not just bringing that person back onto the system, not just inclusion, but actually asking questions of who is accountable for all that I have lost because of the digital exclusion? How will I be compensated? Who is the official, the functionary who was responsible for dropping me off a database, for excluding me, for data entry errors? Who is going to be penalized, and what course correction will the government take to make sure there is no such case like me ever again? So really accountability's battle is so much, and like we discussed in the session, we are really fighting for breadcrumbs at the moment of chalo वापस तो add कर दो, pension वापस add कर दो, FRA का map ठीक कर दो. That's all. The questions of accountability have not even begun. So I think these are some questions that should ground us in whoever is trying to make an effort, and all of us individually, collectively as society are making efforts towards.
Thanks so much, Rakshita, and you have the absolute freedom to bid us a Irish goodbye, like quietly go away. Whenever, whenever you think your train is due. Um, how many of you here in this audience remember COVID? Remember something called COVID? But replace the D for donkey with a N for Nepal. How many of you remember COVID? Does anyone remember that? Anyone? You do? No, not too many people do. Good. So that's like 10 marks more. But, so for all you ignorants who have not, who don't remember, there was this app that came from the heavens. And we were all told, you want to travel? Register yourself. You want to move around? Register yourself. You want food? Register. And we all, went and got. It was the most horrible thing to do. It didn't work for a long time. It was so difficult to get, but you had to travel. I remember sitting in San Francisco airport and trying to download Covin because that girl wouldn't allow me to board the flight. So we did all of that. Great effort. And one day, a few days later, comes this little news that, actually no one knows who owns Covin. And God knows where that data is. It was such a travesty. We did all of that to be told that, no one in the government knows who the developer of that platform was. And who owned it. So this is history. This is like 100 years ago. But there is something called a Digi Yatra. Remember? We all did the ease of flying. And one day we were told, actually that company that does Digi Yatra is God knows what it is doing with that data. So we've closed that down and given it to somebody else. That kind of cavalier attitude towards serious data, health data is not something to trifle with. Travel data is just as important. And to have such an attitude, and I don't know, I don't know if anyone ever paid for those mistakes or even was questioned as to what happened. That's, these two instances to me really define the animal that we are discussing in this room. And it is, and it's not great news. And if we are not going to hold somebody accountable, and if we don't know what we are going to do with these platforms and who gives them to us, then we are looking into some Frankensteinian future that we have no clue as to how to handle. And therefore, I want to ask Setu this, that Setu, what is it about platforms? Are these platforms a passing phase in technology? Or are we looking at a world where we are going to move from one platform to another to another? And if we are, then what should we do? How do we ensure that these platforms are 100% accountable?
Thank you. I think that's a heavy question to answer by myself. I think we'll all need to put our collective minds together to answer that question. But from what I see, I think we are moving towards platformization day by day, and in some cases we are replacing, or in other cases the platforms themselves are evolving into or morphing into how our needs are evolving. Um, uh, More and more apps and platforms are becoming super apps now. There's a chat feature when you order groceries. We don't need it, but yeah, it's going to come. And we have seen this happen in isolated ecosystems around the world. For instance, in China, in Russia, where the ecosystems are isolated from the rest of the world, they have morphed and evolved into more platformized versions of themselves from before. Um, and with that goes away the accountability, or there's not even a question of accountability. I think when we talk about accountability in context of technology, it should come by design, but it is not discussed, not even acknowledged, or understood. Uh, and while we are moving towards a world which is more and more platformized, how to hold them accountable is, I think, one of the biggest challenges of this century. Everything from democratic stability to societal upheaval depends on if the platforms can be held accountable or not. Um, some jurisdictions, countries, regions have tried to rein that in. One of the examples that I've recently seen working to some extent is EU's CSDD regulation, which is due diligence directive of sustainability, but that has some other aspects which makes companies and very large platforms accountable to a lot of things. Similarly, India and other jurisdictions are trying to come up with regulations and policies which make accountability at a core of uh, of their design, but that comes with risk of authoritarianism, misuse of that regulation to suppress freedom of speech. So it's a balance which is hard to strike, and but it starts with us being aware and us demanding for that kind of balance and accountability to begin with.
Thanks. And, a question that I don't want you to answer yet, but I want to throw to the audience is, at least I haven't been able to answer this question to myself. A very basic question. What's the difference between a platform and an app? I've still not understood it, but I'll come back to that later. Before I get back to that question, um, I want to get to Niti and again ask a very fundamental question, but a very important one. Niti, what do you think are the most vulnerable communities in this context? In this context of digital inclusion, who are the most marginalized? The ones that you think are going to be the big challenge for us to get them into this digital citizenship that we want?
Well, I wish there was a straightforward answer to that. But before I come to the question you've asked, I actually want to take 2 steps back, speak to a little bit of what Injanil talked about, speak to a little bit of what Rakshita and Setu were also trying to speak about. I've been listening to this conversation over the last almost 2 days now, and the fact that this summit, part of it at least, is called Digital Citizen Summit, it just makes me think the whole point of what we're trying to do and everything we're trying to say is hinged upon our understanding of ourselves as citizens, right? But the more nuances that we explore about all of the multifaceted challenges we're seeing propping up in this day and age and getting more and more complicated, is that our citizenship and everything that comes with it, right? Rights, the ability to ask questions, the fact that we deserve to have answers, the fact that we deserve to have transparency about the information that we should rightly have. Are we truly citizens? whether it's in, with respect to our governments or the industries that we transact with or interact with, or are we now morphing into subjects? Because if we are citizens, then we shouldn't be having these conversations. So then that brings me to the second point that I'd like to maybe talk about before I go to your question. As subjects, then we have no rights, right? We're just supposed to accept that things will go wrong, our data will be misused, our data will be parsed, we will be tracked, and we will therefore be consumer subjects. We will not even have the ability to think for ourselves or choose for ourselves. And then that makes me think that, we need to now maybe start, we've done great work, connectivity, access, empowerment, communities, the ability for communities to really have a great role in designing their own future. But I think now we need to evolve this debate into talking about agency, because that's where all of this needs to move to, right? We keep talking about the word inclusion, we keep talking about the word empowerment, but these are all words that someone else does to you, right? Inclusion has a power dynamic, that I have the power to include you. Empowerment has a power dynamic. I have the power to empower you. But ideally speaking, in a utopia, we don't even need to do this. People should have the agency to design their lives, to design their communities, to design their futures, and decide for themselves what they'd like to have, to do, not to do. But we don't live in a utopia. So let me bring this metaphysical conversation back. And just say that I think identity in today's day and age is an intersectional one. As a woman, as a brown woman, I do not have as much privilege as a white man, but I definitely do have more privilege than someone who is gender fluid and maybe black, or maybe someone who comes from a less privileged, economically privileged background than I do, right? So taking all of these intersectionalities of identities into the question, I don't think it's enough to say that we need to recognize who we need to bring into the fold. I think we need to be mindful of the intersectionalities which put us at an underprivileged, and therefore understand that there are going to be differentiated solutions to addressing each and every one of these intersecting realities of identities.
So I'm randomly going to force some of you in the audience, whose names I know, to ask a quick question.
Actually, we have 130 million senior citizens and elderly.
Yeah.
My estimate is 100 million are out of this digital economy. How do you plan to get them in?
Wonderful. Wonderful. Thanks. I thought I'd got Matthew into a spot, but he was ready with his question. Shaban, I'm sure, is going to be challenged. Yeah, Shaban.
I think that...
Here. Can you give it to Sanjay? Yeah.
I think that next stage, because we were dealing largely the accountability question, if we can deal more on the welfare state,
Right.
and the digital inclusion, particularly on the public policy, looking from the government sides, I mean the state governments as well as central governments, and debate and discuss how the programs are reaching to the people through the digital mechanism.
Sanjay.
Mathematically as well as socially. So the question that first came to my mind, including intersectionality, was back to a grid which has got age, the age group, and the social segment of the society, old, young, as well as the middle-aged people, and of course the youngsters. If I look at that entire grid, a number of boxes, at least 25 boxes come into play. And the key over there is accountability and reaching those people with relevance. And that should be the approach as a citizen to solve this, as an organization, as researchers, to solve the problems that are required to be done. And of course, overarching on this entire story is the fact that we are facing a unknown challenge in the form of climate change, which basically means roti, kapda, makan, healthcare and education are all under threat. And where does citizen awareness and digital empowerment
Okay,
help us?
so that's the question mark. Yes, Osama.
In terms of accountability, if somebody can, give insight, is that unless there is a forceful ask for accountability, the platforms and the providers would continue to escape because it makes business for them to not be accountable. So are we losing citizen-centric thought process on, and are we completely behaving like a consumer? Even if we're behaving like a consumer, there is a consumer right also, but even
Superb.
that one, yeah.
Got your question? Yes.
I just wonder how, when there are so many different types of people in our country, how are we going to include them when the languages are different, when their needs are different? When we keep talking about digital inclusion and all that, how do you take into account their cultural differences also? So we, people who speak in English, like we talk in Western notions, we understand things like ownership and GI and copyright. Whereas I speak from the craft sector, how do we make them understand that the Western people have a different idea of ownership and these people have different this thing? How do we bring them into this conversation?
And it's also something I brought up yesterday when I was presenting the hackathon.
Yeah.
Our experiences from collecting voice data on the ground have been that women are culturally not allowed to come outside their houses, right? To do anything for themselves. It's mostly the men going out. So when organizations like, say, AI for Bharat or other grassroots organizations who are working on this go on the ground, they usually get voice data from men, very few from women. So that is like, among the many layers of challenges that we face, that is one challenge that we witnessed. And what can we do to have more and more women represent themselves in voice data sets?
You know, this question that Osama asked before he disappeared is, it's the critical question that, to all of you, that does one demand accountability or does one supply accountability? You know, is it my remit to demand my governors to be accountable, or is it her job to be accountable? The example that I want to give is this recent abhorrent example of these 24 kids who died drinking a cough syrup in Rajasthan and Madhya Pradesh. Who is accountable for that? And you have some random pharmaceutical fellow who's been blacklisted from Tamil Nadu, having killed a few people in Gambia, now kills people in Rajasthan and MP, and till date, who is accountable? And who is at fault there? We, because we are not demanding accountability, or a poor regulator that does not have accountability standards? You know, for us, at least in our country, this seems to be such a big tragedy that we have all these failures and we don't know whether we should ask that question and who to ask that question. That's going to be the issue in a bigger manner in the digital citizen debate. So these questions on the elderly, the welfare state, the issues of climate change, the demand for accountability, the diversity that exists, and the issue of women being marginalized. Do you think that's a good list of questions that we can take forward for the next one, or do you want to add one more? And that's all. You just get that 10 seconds.
That's quite an exhaustive list, by the way, and I was wondering whether we have to answer all of them right now.
No.
At least
Yes,
we have
add
a year
to
to
that.
deliver.
Yes, add to the.
No, but just adding to your point, I think it's not a question of demand. We deserve that accountability.
Yeah, absolutely.
Everyone deserves that accountability, and I think one step towards that could be the collectivization of the voice. I will take one example. The author of the book was mentioning yesterday in terms of the gig workers, how they got together and demanded accountability, right? So as organizations, as funders, we can take steps towards collectivization and kind of enhance their capacities to at least go and ask the questions. आपने जैसे कहा, that incident of 24 deaths.
Yeah.
We have got used to life chalta hai kind of. People die, life goes on. We have got used to that.
Yeah.
But someone needs to shake that system up. So any such incident happens, there should be a platform where they can, start demanding those answers.
Thanks.
And the powers that be should know that there are people who are asking
Who are
questions.
going to demand. Yes. Sid, quick.
I think citizen activism needs to step up. We've, as you were saying, we've gotten used to it. It's part of our life. We have 900 AQI. Yeah, it happens every year. We have accepted it and we have taken it as part of life. We have to start resisting, ask questions, pursue activism actively without putting yourself at risk. But yes, pursue activism actively. And there can be various ways of resistance. It doesn't have to be, you don't have to go on the streets and protest. There are different ways of activism and resistance and demanding accountability. And we must exercise all of them, like starting with, I don't know, Right to Information Act. You should try to use it as much as you can. It costs 10 rupees to get an answer. And sometimes you don't get an answer, but you get things moving. It has happened to me a few times that I was not getting an answer. I was not getting a clear understanding of what is happening, where things are stuck. I file an RTI and then things are moving. I still didn't get an answer. It was a vague answer, but at least things have started moving. So I think we have to do little things on our part as much as we can.
Of course, these are great questions, and I think they're very representative of the debate we're currently in the midst of. But I think in addition to citizen activism and doing your part and exercising your rights and privileges, I think there is great power to be found in communities, which is so central to the last 2 days that we've had together. But along with communities, also collectives and unions, right? There is strength in numbers. There is strength when people come together. There have been instances where people got together and toppled regimes, right, in the region where we're sitting. So the fact that we're taking so much for granted and life chalta hai and, there's no dignity of life, there's no respect for the dignity of life, all of these are pretty political questions, and I don't think that we're going to get answers to these extremely political questions by being passive. So I think being active citizens, active interrogators of the sort of life that we're living, the various facets, but also great power to be had in communities, collectives, and unions.
Thanks so much. Indranil, Niti, and Setu, Rakshita in her absence. Thanks everybody, and no thanks to Sonia and Shalini, who disappeared just when I wanted them to take part in the debate. But yeah, but thank you very much, everyone. We will, this was in some sense an encapsulation of what we've discussed over the last 2 days, and great questions from all of you that we will feed into our next edition.